Well, good morning, church. I hope that you're doing well. So I'm coming to you from my study in my house right now, and I would be outside. However, our neighbor, I think he's got an aftermarket muffler on his car, and it's it's pretty loud, impressive in a lot of ways, but doesn't make for good video recording. So this morning we're looking at Revelation chapter 12. So if you haven't read that, I would like for you to pause the video and read that as with your family, by yourself, wherever you are. Read Revelation chapter 12 together, and then unpause the video, and I'll give a few comments on it. All right. So Revelation chapter 12 is a really interesting text. We have the woman who's this sort of cosmic woman in many ways, who gives birth to this man child, which is in a sense the Christ child, but it's more. It's not just that. It's a bit more. And then we also have the appearance of the great red dragon, and it tries to eat the child. And then we have the war in heaven between Michael and his angels and the dragon's cast down to earth. So my cat might make an appearance as well, so I apologize for that if she does. So I want to comment on a couple things here. The first that really gets asked is in Revelation. I feel like the main question for the entire book is what is going on. Just gonna get my cat off the window. Come here, cat. So what is going on here? In chapter 12, we have the seventh trumpet that's sounded, and rather than bad news, it's this sort of in chapter 11. It's actually this announcement of the triumph of God over his enemies, which is a good thing for those who are Christians in the first century, where their enemies are really a lot, and it's really easy in particular for Rome to exercise its power against them. However, in the first 11 chapters, there's not really said much about a sort of, there's the cosmic reign of God, but there's not really the cosmic enemy of God that's really talked about. Doesn't really talk about spiritual enemies of the people of God. In Revelation 12, and also in, let's see, I think it's in 11 with the language of the beast. We're sort of introduced to these enemies of the people of God in a spiritual sense. Now, these enemies, we'll get to the second beast, but the first beast kind of represents Rome, and there's several different images that represent Rome through this. The first beast is generally thought of the Roman Empire, and even the Caesars are sort of the heads, as we'll talk about later. The dragon, though, and it's actually given to us here in, let's see here. The dragon in verse 9, it says, the great dragon, the primeval serpent, known as the devil or Satan, who had deceived all the world. So here it tells us we're not talking about a literal dragon, we're talking about the image of a dragon, or sort of this ancient giant serpent. In Genesis, in the ancient Near East, there's this idea that there was a giant chaotic sea serpent that was responsible for sort of the entropy and chaos in the world, and even death. But here we have the reference to the great dragon, the primeval serpent, known as the devil or Satan. Throughout this entire text, there's a huge references to Genesis 3, sort of the deception of Eve. She was deceived by a serpent, but she was also the first to give birth to human beings. And so in the same way, the serpent sort of is after this woman in this text. And however, God protects the woman. The serpent can't actually get to the dragon can't get to the woman. It can't devour the child. The child and the woman are protected. They're taken up to heaven. And so what actually is the woman here? There is a callback here to Genesis 3, where Adam and Eve, in many ways, they're representative. If you read it, there is a representation there of more than just two people. There's also a representation that Adam and Eve somehow stand in for humanity in a lot of ways. A lot of the struggles of Adam and Eve are reflected back onto the people of Israel as they read those stories. In the same way, this woman, I think, represents not just Eve, but the collective people of God, Old Testament and New Testament. So Israel and the church, and that can be seen in the fact that she has this victor's crown, this crown of 12 stars. She's adorned with the sun, standing on the moon, and she has sort of the Stephanos, or the victor's crown, around her head. And it says, she was pregnant and in labor, crying aloud in the pangs of childbirth, and then she gives birth to the son. Well, the nation of Israel, the people of Israel, they're responsible for the birth of Christ. Christ comes from the nation of Israel. However, in the same way as there are the 12 sons of Isaac, there are also the 12 sons of Jacob. The 12 sons of Jacob. There are also the 12 apostles that stand in for, like, these are the heads of these of the new people of God. In the same way that the brothers were the heads of the tribe, the ancestors of the tribes of Israel, the apostles are sort of these iconic 12 for a complete nation, so to speak. So the woman stands for the people of God, and she is victorious. She's protected by God from the dragon. And it says the woman escaped into the desert, where God made a place of safety ready for her to be looked after in 1,260 days. Now, 1,260 days. That should bring to mind the time of the prophets, who are, it says, I shall send my 2 witnesses to prophesy for 1,260 days in chapter 11. These prophets are killed for their testimony, and it's this time of great persecution that takes place. And here we have the woman who stands for the church, for the nation of Israel, that during this time of persecution, she is protected by God. She's gone to the wilderness, which is iconic for when God protected the people of Israel when they were in the wilderness, before they went into the land of Israel. And so the serpent, the devil, Satan, did not get the woman at the beginning. And then it says, a war broke out in heaven. The child descends to heaven, and this child he was brought into the world, a son who is to rule all nations with an iron scepter. That's Messiah language there. And the child was taken straight up to God and to his throne. So the son is taken to rule from heaven, and then the church is looked after. This is also, as far as a woman being used to represent a corporate people, that's used in sort of contrast to the Whore of Babylon. That's language for the city of Rome later in this text. And also in Isaiah, to talk about Judah, there's language that describes the nation as a woman. And so in the same way, the church is this great heavenly bride of Christ. It is the people of God. It is who brought forth the Christ into the world. And so it's God's participation with humanity, with his elect, with the people of God. And so then we have the language of this woman. Satan's after her, but he can't get her. Then there's a war that breaks out. And it says, Michael and his angels attacked the dragon. The dragon fought back with his angels, but they were defeated and driven out of heaven. All right. Now, is this talking about a historical battle that took place in heaven? No. What it is emphasizing is that Satan, as great an enemy as he is, has never won and will never win against God or against the people of God. God is in control. And I spoke this week about how angels are actually messengers. And they're also, they are mighty in a lot of ways. But their primary function is to do the will of God, to carry out the message, to proclaim something of God. However, the Old Testament, he's the Lord of hosts. And when you see Lord of hosts, that's the Lord of armies. And so the angels are also armies in a lot of ways, or they're his warriors. And what's interesting here is that as Christians, we proclaim that Christ defeated Satan on the cross, that Christ defeated Satan in the resurrection, that God has defeated Satan before, that God has been in control even before Jesus' death and resurrection. And also that when the end of time comes, God will cast Satan. We'll get to that in Revelation. But God will finally defeat Satan. And here it's interesting. Look, if Satan was that great of an enemy, would he be able to beat angels? You would think yes, because it's not God that fights Satan here. It's not Jesus that fights Satan here. It's God's messengers. If we think Satan stands a chance against God, we're dead wrong. Jesus sends Michael, and he says, "Hey, go take care of this dragon pest thing, this pest problem that we have here that's creeping in. Go take care of that." And Michael does it, and it doesn't say that Satan stood a chance, just that Satan tried it and he failed utterly. God took care of him. And so the great dragon was hurled down to the earth, and his angels were hurled down with him. They were whipped. They were beaten desperately. And it says, then we have this song here that takes place. They have triumphed over him by the blood of the Lamb and by the witness of their martyrdom, because even in the face of death they would not cling to life. Okay, so we have this song that takes place here. And then we have this verses 13 through 17. So the devil found himself thrown down to earth, and he began to pursue the woman. So the devil finds himself totally beaten by God, by the armies of God. And so he decides to try and defeat the woman, to eat the woman. But she was given a huge pair of eagle's wings to fly away from the serpent into the desert, to the place where she was to be looked after for a year and twice a year and half a year. And so the serpent, according to his wiles, he's not a fire-breathing serpent apparently, he's a water-breathing serpent. And so it opened its mouth, it vomited water from its mouth like a river after the woman to sweep her away in the current. But the earth came to her rescue. It opened its mouth and swallowed the river thrown up by the dragon's jaws. Then the dragon was enraged with the woman and went away to make war on the rest of her children. That is, all who obey God's commandments and bear witness for Jesus. So the woman, who is the church of God, the sort of corporate idea of the people of God, Satan is after her, but he can't get her. What does this say? I think there's a few things that if we it might depend on how much you watch the news. If you pay attention to the news, there's a lot of stuff to be afraid of. There's a lot of things to be riled up about. A lot of reasons to be scared about where the nation is heading, where America is heading. And this 4th of July, where we celebrate sort of America declaring its independence from Great Britain and its desire to, have the will of the people represented in its highest form of government. We celebrate that. However, the will of the people right now in this nation doesn't necessarily seem to be towards obeying God's commandments or towards the will of the people. Today doesn't seem to be a people totally interested in living out the Sermon on the Mount, to a people who pursue holiness. That, I'm just speaking from my perspective here. You can disagree, but the mother of the child here, the people of God, is not necessarily the United States of America. And this might be a radical statement, but the Constitution, unfortunately, is not the Bible. The Constitution is not the inspired Word of God. And so there are certain injustices that can take place. And I think what's important to focus on here is that whatever injustices might occur, whatever bad things that we look at that are happening, we think, man, this isn't good for the nation. This isn't good for the people of God. This isn't going to be good for our freedom to worship, our freedom to assemble. This isn't going to be good for what it means to be a Christian in America. I think the message of this text is, it's okay. Don't worry. It's to be expected that nations rebel against God. It's to be expected that the devil is at work still in the world, trying to consume and to destroy the lives of people. It's okay. That's to be expected, I think. But what Christians hold firm to, and part of the good news that we have, is that victory and power and empire forever have been won by our God. And all authority for His Christ, now that the persecutor who accused our brothers day and night before our God has been brought down, they have triumphed over him by the blood of the Lamb. That ultimately for Christians, there is victory to be won. That our future is secure. That God is sovereign over all time, over all space. God is sovereign over whatever bad things happen. And I want to point out something that's I like to try to find ways that the text challenges us. And there's a couple things here, especially verse 11 and 12, which I think are sort of the centerpiece or the big idea of this chapter. Talking about the people of God, they have triumphed over the great dragon or the serpent or the devil or Satan. They have triumphed over him. How have they triumphed? By making war, by fighting back. They've triumphed over him by the blood of the Lamb. Through Jesus' death, we have been saved. We've been rescued from the waters that threaten to sweep us away, from the sin in our hearts. We've been saved from that. From the wiles of the devil, we have been saved from that. But it's not just that. It says they've been saved by the blood of the Lamb. They've triumphed over him by the blood of the Lamb and by the witness of their martyrdom. Because even in the face of death, they would not cling to life. Even in the face of death, they would not cling to life. If you would, I'd like for us to reflect upon, what are the things that we do in this world that are, in a sense, clinging to life? Part of the in the Constitution, it says everybody has the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The Christian message is that those who triumph in Christ, they give up their rights willingly. They give up their right to life. They say, you know what, I'm not going to hold on to this because I trust that God is powerful even in the face of death. That God is victorious even if you kill me. And so part of that early witness of Christians as they were being persecuted by their government was to say, listen, Rome, you can kill us, but God will give us the victory even in death. In the same way, I think it is that living a life of self-sacrifice, living a life of picking up your cross daily and following Jesus, that is countercultural no matter where you go. It's not easy. It's the most difficult thing that we can do, but Jesus Christ has done it for us, and the Holy Spirit empowers us to do it every day. So I hope this is an encouragement and a challenge to us as we live during these hard times, where it's easier to have enemies and to try to figure out how can we preserve our own life and style of life. But I don't know that that's what we're called to. We're called to be the people of God, even in the face of death. So I hope that you're blessed by this text today. I hope it's a bit less mysterious, and I hope that Revelation is proving to be a letter of encouragement to the people of God. God bless you.